work tomorrow.
Are you going to school tomorrow? I don't know yet.
No.
No.
Because I gotta get good rest.
Oh. Oh no, we get a whole extra day together. Do it.
We can play so much games on Xbox, but we can play Roblox.
Why not?
Because as you're turning on.
Huh?
As you're turning on for me.
Turning on? What's that mean? What do you mean?
Like, when I'm in the middle of playing Just to Impress, ads come on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Since when?
Today, yesterday, every day.
stand, reviewed the report, transferred that information to a district attorney, who then put it into a criminal complaint. There's no way the court can evaluate the reliability of that evidence. So I object. It's not evidence.
This is a preliminary hearing. For the purposes of that, the court will will receive the criminal complaint over the objection. Go ahead, Attorney Labrie.
Thank you. When you arrived in Two Rivers on February 20th of 2024, was law enforcement speaking with Mr. Vang at his apartment as well as at the Two Rivers Police Department?
Yes, they were.
Did they also speak with a Katrina Bauer?
Yes.
And as part of your work throughout this case, did you review some of those interviews?
I did.
I'm going to start with Katrina Bauer. What was her relationship to victim child one?
She was the mother of,
Now, my objection is that the question does not specify whether that's calling for his personal knowledge or hearsay. So I object to the form of the question.
Can you rephrase the question?
Was Katrina Bauer asked if her relationship to victim child one?
yes.
And did she respond as what her relationship was?
Yes, she did.
What was her relationship?
She was the mother to the missing child.
Did she provide information about why the child was in Two Rivers?
I have the same objection. The form of the question does not lay a foundation as to whether this witness is interviewing Ms. Bauer or if she's being interviewed by somebody else who then filed a report reviewed by this witness. I mean, I believe there needs to at least be that foundation.
Attorney Labrie.
I can rephrase. Did you review reports regarding her interview or watch recordings of her interview?
Yes.
Okay. Was it review reports or watch the recording or both?
I reviewed reports.
Okay. And that was part of your duties as being one of the lead investigators on this?
Correct.
Okay. And do you recall who the specific officers were who spoke with Katrina Bauer?
Initially, it was Lieutenant Jacob Glazer from the Two Rivers Police Department and Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office Detective Mike Herman.
Did she indicate to those interviewers why victim child one was in Two Rivers?
Yes.
And what did she say?
She was in a relationship with Jesse Vang, and she resided in Wisconsin Dells. She had trouble controlling victim child one's behavior issues. Therefore, victim child one was sent to Vang's apartment in Two Rivers to deal with the punishment related to his bad behaviors.
Was there a time frame as far as when victim child one was in Two Rivers?
Victim child one had been going to Two Rivers for about a week at a time since January of 2024. He'd spend about a week at Vang's apartment and then return back to Wisconsin Dells with his mother. At this recent stay, victim child one had been at Vang's apartment since February 12th, 2024.
Did law enforcement conduct follow-up to determine whether victim child one had been exchanged or with Jesse Vang during that February 12th time period?
Yes, we did.
And did you review some video or other evidence that was able to confirm whether victim child one was transferred to Mr. Vang?
Yes.
And what kind of evidence did you review?
We watched some video from a quick trip in Fond du Lac where Katrina Bauer had turned over child victim one to Jesse Vang on February 12th, 2024.
Was on February 20th of 2024, was Mr. Vang interviewed as well?
Yes.
Initially, this call came in as a missing child, correct?
Yes.
The first law enforcement agency responding was Two Rivers Police Department, local agencies, correct?
Correct.
And do you recall who was speaking with Mr. Vang initially?
I don't recall which patrol officer initially, but I know at some point Lieutenant Glazer was also speaking with Jesse Vang.
And was Mr. Vang asked about victim child one?
Yes.
And did he provide any information on whether victim child one was staying with him?
Yes, he did.
What kind of information did he provide?
He indicated that victim child one had been staying with him, and Vang referred to as babysitting him. He confirmed that he was in a relationship with Katrina Bauer, and that victim child one had been staying with him as punishment for his bad behaviors back home.
Punishments with his behaviors with Miss Bauer?
Correct.
Did he indicate specifically what kind of punishments were used?
Yes.
And what kind of punishments were used?
So throughout the course of the contacts with the police officers, he had initially indicated that he was using timeouts with victim child one and then withholding things from him, such as milk, food, ice cream. That then later transitioned into that learning that victim child one was afraid of cold water, and that Vang would threaten the use of cold water on victim child one for punishment. In addition to that, Vang also indicated that he used standing and praying as a primary form of punishment with victim child one. He further described that standing and praying would primarily be victim child one standing in the corner of Vang's bedroom, facing the corner by himself with his hands folded in front of him, palms facing together, and praying for an extended period of time, as well as standing for extended periods of time. Additionally, he indicated that during this last stay, since February 12th, at the time of until February 20th, 2024, victim child one was not allowed to have access or play with any toys. In addition, Vang also indicated that he did not allow victim child one to have any contact with his mother, with the thought that of depriving the child of things would make him more appreciative of those things later on.
I'm going to go back to the standing and praying that you described. You indicated that some of that was for extended periods of time, correct?
Yes.
Did he give a time frame?
At certain parts during the conversation, he'd said that he would make him stand for an hour. Other times he mentioned that he would stand for 2 to 3 hours at a time.
As part of this investigation, did law enforcement review cell phone information from Katrina Bauer as well as Jesse Vang and some of the children's cell phones?
Yes.
Did you review some of that data from Katrina Bauer as well as Jesse Vang and some of the other children's cell phones?
I did.
When Katrina Bauer and Jesse Vang were interviewed, did law enforcement try and determine a timeline as far as when Katrina was in Two Rivers and when she was in the Wisconsin Dells?
Yes.
And one of those time periods involved February 14th of 2024, correct? to being in Two Rivers on February 14th?
Initially, she had denied being in Two Rivers, however, later acknowledged that she was in Two Rivers on the early morning hours of February 14th, 2024.
And when there was a review of the cell phone, were there any photographs that would substantiate her being in Two Rivers on that date?
Yes,
I
sir.
object to the question. There's no foundation as to whose cell phone.
I'll rephrase. When Katrina Bauer's cell phone was reviewed, were there any photographs from that February 14th timeframe of 2024?
Yes, there was.
And did you review that photograph?
Yes, I did.
And was that a photograph of victim child one?
Yes, it was.
Your Honor, I'd ask permission to approach.
Okay.
That's Exhibit 2.
Showing you it's been marked as Exhibit 2. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is Exhibit 2?
Exhibit 2 is a copy of a deleted photo that was found in Katrina Bauer's cell phone. The video shows victim child 1 that appears to be laying on the couch or the futon. He's not wearing a t-shirt, and he's partially covered up in a red, black, and white fuzzy blanket. Of note is there's a black blindfold over his eyes. And then also of note is there appears to be marks or bruises along the side of his neck and near the elbow of his arm.
And does that fairly and accurately the Exhibit 2 that you have in front of you is a copy, obviously. Does that fairly and accurately represent that photograph?
Yes.
And move Exhibit 2 into evidence.
There's no foundation as to when the photograph was taken, and without that, it's not relevant.
Attorney LaBrie?
I believe he testified that there was a photograph located from February 14th, but I can ask a follow-up. When the Katrina Bauer cell phone was reviewed, did it indicate, during that review, are you able to see a date or any time marking of when that photograph would have been taken?
Yes, the metadata showed that.
And what date would that photograph have been taken?
February 14th, 2024 at 3:13 a.m.
I'd move Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Any objection, Attorney Jensen?
No.
Jensen? All right, the court on its, the court will receive that exhibit and on its own motion seal that document, for use by the attorneys, only.
Thank you. Special Agent Volan, as part of your work on this case, you indicated you reviewed some cell phone information. Were Katrina Bauer and Jesse Vang communicating in other means besides talking on a phone?
They're also text messaging on their phones and also using Facebook Messenger.
Did you review, or strike that, were the Facebook messages between Katrina Bauer and Jesse Vang obtained by law enforcement?
Yes.
Was one of your tasks in this case to review Facebook messaging between Katrina Bauer and Jesse Vang?
Yes, it was.
And I'm looking in the time period between January 1st of 2024 through that February 20th, 2024 timeframe, okay?
Yes.
Roughly, approximately, how many Facebook messages were going back and forth between Katrina Bauer and Jesse Vang?
I'll just clarify the records that we requested started December 1st of 2023 through February 20th. And during that time frame, approximately 2.5 months, there's well over 15,000 Facebook text messages alone between them.
And your job was to review some of those, correct?
Correct.
And some of them were messaging as far as typing out words. Other times there were pictures and videos, correct?
Yes.
And if there were pictures and videos in these messaging, when you did your review, did you look at those pictures and videos as well?
I did.
Okay. And as far as between that January 1st, 2024 timeframe and February 20th, 2024, was there messaging between Katrina Bauer and Jesse Vang regarding victim child one staying at Jesse Vang's residence at various times through that 2-month time period?
Yes, there was.
And was that also supported by videos and photographs?
Yes, it was.
Um, Are you familiar with Mr. Vang's apartment?
Yes, I am.
So when you were looking at certain photographs, were you able to identify whether victim child one was in that apartment or a different location?
For the most part, yes.
In your review of those messagings between January of 2024 and February of 2024, were there conversations about discipline involving victim child one?
Yes.
And we'll get into some specifics, but generally, what were some of the disciplines that were discussed between Mr. Vang and Ms. Bauer on these Facebook messages?
Some of the forms of discipline, like I mentioned before, was standing for extended periods of time, standing and praying in the corner, making him repeat phrases such as good boy, sorry, mom, over and over several times. There was also some mention of sleep deprivation.
Was cold water mentioned as well?
Yes.
And as far as the standing and praying for periods of time, um, was that a one-time thing or was it more than once?
More than once.
When you were reviewing these videos, you indicated that there were times that victim child one was saying some phrases. And what were those? What was the typical phrase that he would be asked to say to Katrina Bauer?
Sometimes a lot of the phrases were prompted by Jesse Vang, so he would prompt the victim child one what to say, such as sorry, mommy, good boy, no more, I don't want to live at uncle's house anymore, things like that.
When he said he didn't want to live at uncle's house anymore, um, was that ever clarified as far as who uncle was?
Yes, early on in the investigation, the initial responding officers had clarified that with Jesse Vang, because he initially referred to victim child one as his nephew, but then clarified that he's not related via family to the victim child. That's just what he was referred to as.
I'm going to get into some more specifics regarding these Facebook messages, okay? And some of the videos. Specifically, did you review some videos from January 22nd, 2024?
I did.
And just to direct your attention, the first video I'm going to ask you about is at approximately 1856 hours, okay? Was there a video during that time period that you reviewed as far as victim child one standing by a door in Jesse Vang's bedroom?
In order to be accurate, I need to review the criminal complaint.
Your Honor, I'd ask, or strike that. Would that refresh your memory?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd ask permission for him to review page 8 of the criminal complaint.
You may review page 8, take a look at it, and then put the complaint back down.
And the one I'm referencing is at time 18:56. Does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
And what did that video depict?
It was a 9-second video of showing Elijah standing by the door of the apartment. And as it was believed to be Jesse Vang had approached him, victim child 1 seemed to cower and quickly sit down by the door and say, "Don't hit me."
Did he make any references about being a good boy or anything along those lines?
No.
Okay. And shortly, or strike that, also on January 22nd, 2024, was at approximately 22:11, was there some conversation regarding a boot camp?
Yes.
And do you recall what that conversation was?
I'd have to refer to the criminal complaint to refresh my memory.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the officer be allowed to review the bottom of page 8.
You may go ahead and review page 8.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
And what was the message around 22:11?
The message was sent by Jesse Vang, indicating that victim child 1 was in boot camp, and he hates the fact that victim child 1 is a faker and a crier. And he hates the fact that when Jesse walks into the room, victim child 1 says, "Out," and "Don't hurt me."
Okay. Later that evening, on January 22nd, 2024, at approximately 23 hours and 7 minutes, did Mr. Vang message about a punishment that was imposed to victim child 1?
Again, I'd have to refer to the criminal complaint to refresh my memory.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the officer be allowed to review page 9.
I can review page 9.
Which one specifically are we referring to?
January 22nd, 2024, at 23 hours, 7 minutes.
Okay.
What was in that message?
It was a message sent by Jesse saying that this was his punishment from faking earlier, then followed up with a video showing victim child 1 repeating the phrase, "Good boy, good boy, good boy, good boy," 10 times over. Vang makes the comment that no more seeing him. He had been, this was his punishment from 3 hours earlier.
There are several messages after that, talking about this punishment, correct?
Yes,
And some videos that go along with that, correct?
yes,
And we're talking shortly before midnight on January 22nd, going into the early morning hours of January 23rd of 2024, correct?
yes.
Do these videos depict victim child one as far as his physical appearance and what he was physically doing? Some of them.
Yes.
And do you recall what kind of victim child one's appearance or physical actions were in these early morning hours?
Like I said, I'd have to refresh the criminal complaint.
Your Honor, I'd ask permission for him to review page 9.
Go ahead.
And from January 23rd, 2024, shortly after midnight, how did victim child one appear in the video?
Appeared very tired and he was rubbing his eyes, yet he was still being told to continue reciting some phrases.
Later that day, on January 23rd, 2024, at approximately 15 hours and 10 minutes, was there another video sent to Ms. Bauer by Mr. Vang?
Your Honor, at this point, I object on the grounds of relevance. And when this line of questioning first started, I thought it was leading somewhere, but it's over a month before the child disappeared. And none of these incidents seem reasonably likely to have resulted in neglect or death or anything of that nature. So I failed to see the relevance. I object.
Attorney LaBrie?
Your Honor, if you look at the charging paragraph, the incident date that's charged is from January 1st, 2024 through that February 20th, 2024 date. And he's charged with chronic child abuse. This shows the pattern of activity as far as the punishments that were imposed, the types of punishments that were used throughout this time period with Mr. Vang that did lead up to his death.
The objection is noted. I'll allow the question.
Specifically on that January 23rd, 2024 at 15:10, there was a video sent, correct?
Yes,
And do you recall a video with Mr. Vang's hand on victim child's one's neck or shoulder area?
yes,
And do you recall what Mr. Vang was telling victim child one to do or how that interaction occurred on the video?
I don't recall specifically what Mr. Vang was saying. However, he was prompting Elijah to repeat some phrases. And at the same time, while Mr. Vang's hand was on victim child's one neck and shoulder area, and it appeared to be like he was squeezing it. And you could tell that victim child one appeared to be wincing as a result from it.
There were additional messaging through January 24th of 2024 as well, correct?
Correct.
And some of those were discussing, again, sleep deprivation and timeouts that were being used.
Correct.
When you reviewed these photographs and messaging, did you find any photographs or videos that were consistent with that praying position that Mr. Vang had described?
Yes.
Okay. And just my last question regarding these January Facebook messages. On January 31st of 2024, was there any reference by Mr. Vang in a message at approximately 16:35 regarding a baby prison.
Yes.
And do you recall approximately what he messaged about a baby prison?
I believe he messaged, he's in baby prison, RN, suggesting right now.
During the course of your investigation, as part of the investigation, does law enforcement try to determine whereabouts of Mr. Vang during that week of February 12th through February 20th of 2024?
Yes.
And you can do that by different means, correct?
Correct.
Some of that is by cell phone data. Some of that is by video evidence, those types of things, correct?
Correct.
And specifically, did law enforcement try and create a, for lack of a better term, a timeline of what was going on during that time period?
Yes.
I'm going to talk specifically about Friday, February 16th of 2024. And that evening, victim child one was still in Mr. Vang's care, as far as you knew.
Correct.
Okay. And in fact, there was some video evidence from an automobile place where victim child one was seen with Mr. Vang, correct?
On the evening of February 16th, correct.
Okay. After that, was law enforcement able to develop some information as far as Mr. Vang's whereabouts that evening of the 16th after he was at Ross Auto with victim child one?
Yes.
And what type of evidence was law enforcement able to utilize to put together that time period of where he was that evening?
Object on the grounds there's no foundation as to the source of this information.
Attorney LeBray.
I'll rephrase the question, but that's what I'm asking for. What sources of evidence were they able to develop?
You can answer the question.
So we had accumulated text messages, cell tower information from phone companies, information from phone extractions, and video surveillance from multiple different places or businesses.
On the evening of February 16th of 2024, did Katrina Bauer return back to the Two Rivers area?
Yes, she did.
And I'm going to talk as far as cell phone data information. Were you able to see where Mr. Vang's and Miss Bauer's cell phones were traveling that evening?
Yes.
And was there a point in time when Mr. Vang left the Two Rivers area?
Yes.
And where did he travel to? Or where did the cell phone travel to?
We believe both Katrina and Jesse's phone traveled together to the city of Manitowoc. It appears that Jesse Vang got dropped off at Saucy's Bar while Katrina Bauer continued to the Quick Trip.
Did law enforcement follow up with Saucy's Bar to see if Jesse Vang had stopped at that establishment?
Yes.
And were they able to confirm whether he had stopped there?
Yes.
Did Miss Bauer, while Mr. Vang's cell phone was at Saucy's Bar, did she travel to another location?
Yes. She traveled to the Quick Trip in Manitowoc.
Was law enforcement able to obtain surveillance video from that Quick Trip?
Yes.
And was Miss Bauer on any of that surveillance video?
Yes, she was.
Was victim child one seen on that surveillance video?
Victim child one was not seen with Katrina Bauer.
And in fact, some of that surveillance video was inside the Quick Trip as well as exterior, correct?
That's correct.
And did that exterior surveillance video show her car?
Yes, it did.
Or the car she was using, I'm sorry.
The car was owned by Jesse Vang. It was a white Honda, and she was driving it at the time.
And victim child one was not in the vehicle.
Correct.
And was to the best of your knowledge, victim child one ever seen at Saucy's Bar?
We had no information that victim child one was at Saucy's Bar.
Did law enforcement try and determine if anyone was supervising, babysitting, or caring for victim child one that evening of February 16th, 2024?
We could not locate anybody that would have been caring for victim child one except for Jesse Vang and Katrina Bauer.
Katrina Bauer then left Two Rivers the early morning hours of February 17th, 2024, correct?
Correct.
Was victim child one with her when she left, or was victim child one left in Two Rivers?
It's believed that he was left in Two Rivers.
After she left Two Rivers on February 17th, did messaging between Katrina Bauer and Mr. Vang continue?
Yes.
And on February 18th of 2024, at approximately 4:36 a.m., was there a discussion about victim child one and his opinions or their goal as far as his relationship with Mr. Vang?
Yes, there was.
Did you review that discussion as well?
I did.
Can you give a general overview of what that discussion was between Mr. Vang and Ms. Bauer?
The summary was that Vang messaged that I told you to trust me. That Vang said that that he was trying to get the victim child one to fear him, or that there was an inclination of fear, and that Katrina Bauer responded that she didn't want him to fear Vang. However, Vang replied back is now he's going to respect me.
As part of this investigation, were some experts utilized to review evidence?
Yes,
And was one of those experts that was utilized a Dr. Hillary Petska from Children's Hospital of Wisconsin?
yes,
And are you aware of kind of what her specialty is?
yeah. She's a pediatrician at Children's Hospital.
And does she have a specialty within pediatrics that she also has?
I believe it's child abuse and neglect.
Did the investigative team provide her some information to review?
Yes,
What type of, not the whole list, but kind of a general idea, what type of information was provided to her for review?
I believe we provided her prior medical records, social services reports, contents of the messages exchanged between Katrina Bauer and Jesse Vang, the pictures, the photographs associated with those messages, and records like that.
Did she provide the investigative team a report and some conclusions?
Yes, she did.
And did you review what her conclusion was?
I did.
And do you recall what her conclusion was?
I object on the grounds that there's not a foundation as to what information the expert reviewed, and any expert opinion, there has to be a foundation that it'll be helpful to the finder of fact, in this case, the court, and there's nothing that in this record so far, in terms of foundation, that it would be in any way helpful, so I object.
Well, there was testimony that she reviewed prior medical records, pictures, photos, messages, among other documents provided. Attorney Labrie?
Yes.
Well, that explains the media or the medium on which she reviewed it, but doesn't explain what information was reviewed.
For the purposes of the preliminary hearing, I'll allow the question.
Was she specifically asked to review the care or the punishments that were used?
Yes,
And did she reach any conclusions or provide any information to the investigative team regarding the punishments?
she did provide a diagnosis, yes.
Okay. And do you recall what that diagnosis was?
I do recall, in order to be accurate, I'd have to refer to the criminal complaint of what her diagnosis was.
Your Honor, I'd ask permission for the officer to review page 16 of the criminal complaint.
Okay.
Did you want me to read what her diagnosis was?
If the court would allow, it might expedite things.
What paragraph are we looking at?
55.
Attorney Jensen, any objection?
I would object to reading that paragraph into the record because as it's used in this situation, physical abuse has a legal definition, provided for by the statutes. And so to allow the state to introduce evidence that this doctor supposedly made a diagnosis, and I'm using air quotes on the diagnosis because a diagnosis is a medical conclusion, not a legal conclusion. So the fact that she made a medical diagnosis of physical abuse, psychological, emotional maltreatment, and neglect is not relevant to whether that behavior meets the legal definition provided by the statutes. So I object.
Attorney LaBrie.
Your Honor, Dr. Petska is a pediatrician with Children's Hospital. She's a child abuse specialist. I understand that the diagnosis phrasing is usually used in medical terminology, but she is providing information here about these types of physical acts that were required to be done by victim child 1 and how that affected him and what that would have done to him, which I think is absolutely relevant as far as the purpose of this preliminary hearing to assist the court on whether those actions would fall under child abuse or not.
Your Honor, I didn't object when the state was introducing evidence of what was done because that's relevant. But Dr. Petska's opinion, medical opinion concerning the nature of that behavior is not relevant, so I object.
Attorney LaBrie, can you, I guess, get to the conclusion of what the doctor found?
She provided information about what the standing and praying and those types of punishments, what that would do as far as what that would cause to the child. If, for purposes of today, we can leave out the diagnosis of physical abuse, but I still think that her information as far as whether this was maltreatment or not is relevant. We use experts frequently in these types of situations to describe what this effect would have on a child or any other human being. Physicians are regularly called to express that in courtrooms. I think that her information as far as what these punishments would have done and what they're consistent with and if they're maltreatment or not is relevant.
Well, I'll admit that the state does frequently call Dr. Petska for that exact purpose, but I disagree that it's allowed in my trials because I always object. And I don't think her characterization in medical terms of whether something is abuse or not is relevant. So I object.
For the purposes of today's preliminary hearing, we'll allow the question.
What type of information did Dr. Petska provide as far as the punishments?
Her diagnosis was that victim child one was diagnostic for physical abuse, psychological, emotional maltreatment, and neglect. She noted that the history provided by caregivers to law enforcement and messages to each other is consistent with torture.
Again, I'm object on the grounds of relevance and move to strike that answer.
Again, for the purposes of the preliminary hearing, we'll allow it.
Did she go on to talk about the type of child maltreatment?
Yes,
And what did she indicate?
a type of child maltreatment characterized by physical assault or abuse, psychological maltreatment, and neglect resulting in prolonged emotional distress, pain and suffering, bodily injury, disfigurement or dysfunction, and or death.
Did she specifically note what types of punishments were part of this maltreatment?
Yes,
And what specific punishments?
Your Honor, whether a punishment is appropriate or not is not a medical question. It's a legal and factual question, and so this is not relevant. I object.
It goes to the punishments that she's referring to in her diagnosis.
For the purposes of today's hearing, we'll allow the question.
What type of maltreatment did she describe as far as the which punishments was she referring to as far as the maltreatment?
she was referring to the exposure to cold water, the cold showers, sleep deprivation, the isolation from his mother, and depriving him of some of those basic needs.
Did she also include anything regarding the timeouts?
Yes,
And specifically what regarding those timeouts?
that the long exposure to standing for long periods of time was correlative to child abuse.
Your Honor, I have nothing else for this specific witness.
All right, Attorney Jensen.
May I see Exhibit 2, please? This is a picture of child victim 1 on February 14th, 2024.
Yes,
And I believe it was taken, at least it was taken with Katrina Bauer's phone, correct?
correct.
He doesn't appear to be malnourished in this photo, at least, does he?
What do you mean by malnourished?
Emaciated, thin, seems to be of normal weight, correct?
I've never met victim child 1. I would have an opinion whether he's malnourished or not.
My question wasn't whether he was in fact malnourished or not. My question was whether in this photo he appears to be emaciated.
And by emaciated, you mean like skinny?
Yes.
To me, he does not appear to be unusually skinny in that photo.
And there is a piece of black cloth over his eyes, apparently, correct?
That's what it appears, correct.
And there are discolorations on the side of his neck and on his elbow, correct?
Yes.
And we don't know how those were caused, do we?
Dr. Pesca did give an opinion about,
Well, I'm not interested in Dr. Petska's opinion. I'm interested in whether you have any actual information as to how they were caused.
Specifically with those injuries, I don't know specifically how those injuries occurred.
Okay, and some of the punishments that you were able to determine were used involved repeating phrases over and over again, correct?
Yes,
Such as, I'm a good boy, correct?
that was one of them.
I'm sorry, mother, right?
Sorry, mama.
And repeating phrases over and over again, at least you have no evidence that repeating phrases over and over again endangers the child's physical health, correct?
I don't have any information that it endangers his physical health.
Another punishment that you talked about was standing with your hands folded and praying, correct?
Correct.
And you have no information that the act of standing in that position, even for an hour or 3 hours, causes any physical damage, correct?
I don't know if it causes any physical damage.
Does praying cause any physical damage?
Prayer in itself, I don't think physically damages anybody.
And not seeing your mother for a week, that doesn't cause any physical damage, does it?
I don't believe it physically damaged a person.
And in all of these text messages that you reviewed, in none of them did Jesse Vang or Katrina Bauer make reference to physical punishments, such as hitting with belts, sticks, anything of that nature, correct?
The cold water could be a physical punishment.
All right, so I'll take it one at a time. There were no text messages that Mr. Vang was using a stick to hit the child, correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
There was no text message that Mr. Vang was using an electrical cord to whip him, correct?
Correct.
There's no evidence that he was punching the child.
There were some references that victim child 1 made in the videos saying, "Ow, don't hit me."
Okay, so you reviewed page 8, the paragraph concerning the text message at 1856. Do you remember doing that?
I do remember reviewing some of the text messages, yes.
And when the prosecutor asked you whether that refreshed your recollection, you said yes, correct?
Yes,
And then you said that in the video, child victim 1 said, "Ow, don't hurt me," or something to that effect, right?
I'd have to look back at what
Do you have the criminal complaint in front of you?
I do.
So turn to page 8, the second to the bottom paragraph at 1856, and tell me whether anywhere in that paragraph it's recorded that child victim said, "Ow, don't hurt me."
Which paragraph are you referring to?
Second to the bottom, the paragraph 12224 at 1856.
No, it states that he's fake crying, and as Vang approaches, victim child 1 quickly sits down and says, "Aye, good boy."
So at least in that paragraph that you're asked to review, the child didn't say anything about, "Ow, don't hurt me," or anything of that nature, did he?
Not in that paragraph.
And there is a reference to something like that in the following paragraph, but that's attributed to Jesse Vang, right? Not to the child.
He's making those comments correct.
So when you said that reviewing those paragraphs refreshed your recollection, do you have some recollection of seeing a piece of evidence where the child said, "Oh, don't hurt me," or anything of that nature?
Um, I don't understand the question.
Well, the prosecutor asked you to review that part of the criminal complaint, correct?
Correct.
And after you reviewed it, you said your recollection was refreshed, right?
Yes.
And then you testified that in the video, the boy sat down and cowered when Jesse Vang came toward him and said, "Oh, don't hurt me." Didn't you testify words to that effect?
Yes.
That's nowhere in the paragraph you reviewed, is it?
Correct. That would be in the paragraph right after that.
Okay. Again, that's Jesse Vang speaking, not the child, right?
Correct.
So my question is whether you are aware of any video or any piece of evidence that shows the child victim cowering when Vang approaches and says, "Oh, don't hurt me."
I don't recall seeing one of those videos in preparation for this hearing.
Now, you testified that Dr. Well, let me start over again. You also testified that in a video, you can see Vang's hand on the child's shoulder and neck area and that he's squeezing, right?
Yes.
Say that? And in order to render that testimony, you were asked to review page 9 of the criminal complaint, the paragraph concerning January 23rd at 15:10. So can you look at that paragraph and tell me when you're there?
Which paragraph are you referencing?
January 23rd at 15:10. It says Vang sent a 27-second video showing. You see that?
I do.
And when you reviewed that, you said it refreshed your recollection, right?
Yes.
And that's when you said the video showed Vang's hand on the child's shoulder squeezing and the child was wincing, right?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that there is nothing in that paragraph about the child wincing, correct?
There's nothing in that paragraph. Correct.
There's nothing in that paragraph about Vang's hand being on his shoulder or neck area, right?
The paragraph says the video shows Vang's hand on victim child's one's neck and shoulder.
Okay, then I'll rephrase the question. There's nothing on there about the hand squeezing the neck.
This paragraph is referring to a summary of all the text messages.
Okay, but you said it refreshed your recollection about seeing that in the video, right?
Yes.
So my question is, if it's not in the criminal complaint that you reviewed, where did you get the information that the child was wincing and the hand was squeezing?
I recall that video.
Okay. You testified that you did this investigation into the whereabouts of Katrina Bauer and Jesse Vang on February 16th, right?
Yes.
You reviewed a video from Saucy's Bar and another video from Quick Trip, right?
I didn't review a video from Saucy's Bar. I reviewed a video from Quick Trip.
And you testified that the child was not in the video, right?
I did not see a child in the video at Quick Trip.
And then you said you could not locate anyone who was a babysitter for the child, right?
Correct.
What efforts did you make to locate the babysitter?
At the time of the initial investigation, we had conducted neighborhood canvases of all the apartment complex members. We've talked to family members. We reached out to people in both individuals' phones of who they would have had contact or communication with. We made contact with Katrina's neighbors in Wisconsin Dells, several different people, if and when the last time they would have seen or had any type of contact with victim child one.
So this was just a general canvas looking for witnesses, right?
Well, part of that canvas on multiple occasions is when was the last time that these people would have seen victim child one?
But you didn't specifically ask, did you babysit for the child? Did you?
I didn't ask.
Did anybody ask?
I believe there were some people that I did ask. Yes, because we did make contact with victim child one's babysitters in Wisconsin Dells.
Well, you wouldn't expect a babysitter from Wisconsin Dells to come to Two Rivers to watch the child, would you?
I don't think that's likely.
Now, it was your testimony that this Dr. Petska diagnosed the child with psychological maltreatment, right?
I believe that was a part of her diagnosis.
Has Dr. Petska ever seen the child?
I believe Dr. Petska has not seen the child in person.
So do you know how she could diagnose psychological maltreatment without seeing and talking to the child?
I don't know how she bases her diagnosis on and how she accumulates her opinions.
Those are all the questions I have.
You, Attorney LeBray, any follow-up?
Just a couple. As part of the February 16th, trying to locate anyone that had seen victim child one, there was also a canvas of the neighboring apartments, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, one of the neighbors babysat at times for another child that was in that apartment.
Yes.
Did any of those canvassing of the neighbors in Two Rivers or other individuals find anyone that was babysitting for that child, victim child one, on February 16th?
No.
You were asked many questions about whether repeating phrases over and over would endanger physical health, or not seeing a mother or individual like that would cause physical damage. Correct? You were asked those questions?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know if that could cause emotional damage?
Yes, it could.
Now, I'm going to object in the grounds that there's no foundation that this witness has the qualifications to tell us whether that could cause emotional damage.
Attorney LeBray?
I can lay some foundation. Special Agent Volan, you indicated that you have been in law enforcement over 24 years, correct?
Correct.
What types of cases have you investigated over your career?
So for 10 years, I was a school resource officer. During that time, I also investigated child abuse and neglect cases. After that, I was a detective at a sheriff's office where one of my assignments was child abuse and neglect cases. And currently my assignment at the Division of Criminal Investigation is internet crimes against children.
As part of your career, do you receive trainings on child abuse and child neglect?
Yes.
As part of those trainings, do you also are you also trained on things that can cause child abuse, as well as what can cause emotional damage to a child?
Correct.
And as part of not only these trainings, but do you also have you also spoken with child victims who have been abused or neglected?
Yes.
And have they conveyed to you what caused them emotional damage or physical pain?
Yes.
And when you indicated that the repeated phrases or the not seeing a mother, those types of things could cause emotional damage. What are you basing that on?
I'm basing that on a professional's opinion. Dr. Petska's a professional opinion.
You were also asked about the standing and praying or holding a position for a long period of time, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, what we're talking about with the standing and holding a position in this case, at times, according to Mr. Vang, was up to 2 to 3 hours, correct?
Yes.
And based upon your training and experience, could that cause physical pain?
Yes.
I have nothing else at this point. Thank you.
Attorney Jensen, any,
No, thank you.
can this witness be excused?
Yes, the state will be calling Special Agent Reagan. Nothing but the
I do.
Be seated. State your full name and spell your first and last name for the record.
Justin Reagan, JUSTEN RAGEN.
Special Agent Reagan, how are you currently employed?
I'm employed with the Wisconsin Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigation, that's commonly referred to as DCI.
And how long have you been with DCI?
Approximately just over 4.5 years.
Prior to being employed by DCI, did you work in law enforcement?
Yes.
And who did you work for?
Previous to DCI, I worked with the Oconto County Sheriff's Office, part-time and full-time. And previous, I had worked with the Langley County Sheriff's Office. I have just over 17.5 years in law enforcement and just over 17 full-time.
I'm going to direct your attention to February 20th of 2024. Were you working for DCI on that date?
I was.
And were you activated regarding a missing child in Two Rivers, Wisconsin?
Yes.
And in fact, the missing child that you were activated about is victim child 1 in this case, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to just back up for a moment. What is your specialty with DCI?
I'm a special agent and I'm assigned to the major crimes unit out of the Appleton field office.
Do you also work cold cases?
I do.
As part of being one of the major crimes investigators, were you part of the investigative team into the whereabouts of victim child 1?
Yes.
As part of that team, did you author and review multiple reports, not only from DCI, but also reviewed reports from Two Rivers Police Department and the Sheriff's Office?
I have.
And you've been part of this investigation from February 20th onward, correct?
Yes.
As part of that investigation, was law enforcement attempting to find the whereabouts of victim child 1?
Yes.
And part of that investigation, do you go backwards from February 20th to try and determine the last time that victim child 1 had been seen?
Yes.
And was that done in this case?
Yes.
Other than statements by Mr. Vang and Katrina Bauer, were you able to find any other independent witnesses who had seen victim child 1 after February 16th of 2024?
No.
There was a point in time on February 16th of 2024 when he was seen by some independent witnesses, correct?
Correct.
And from that point in time, the only information that was provided to you was from Jesse Vang or Katrina Bauer, correct?
Correct.
As part of your investigation, did you also, you and other law enforcement officers review cell phone data from Mr. Vang's phone as well as associated phones with him?
Yes.
And did Mr. Vang have more than one phone?
Yes.
Um, Can you explain how many phones were associated with Mr. Vang or his household?
2.
And who, were both phones his, or did one of the phones belong to somebody else?
Both phones were Jesse's, but one was also utilized by his son.
When you reviewed the data from the phone that was used by his son, were there communications on there from Mr. Vang as well?
Yes.
And in interacting with Mr. Vang and Ms. Bauer, did they admit that Mr. Vang had utilized his son's phone at times?
Yes.
When you're trying to do that backtrack as far as the investigation, do you also look at the cell phone locations, if cell phones move or don't move and where they go?
Yes.
I'm going to go specifically to February 19th of 2024, okay? Did you and other investigators review cell phone information on whether Mr. Vang's phone or the one utilized by his son moved the evening hours of February 19th, or if it was if they were utilized at all?
Yes.
Was there a period of time that drew your interest?
Yes.
And what was that period of time?
Between 5:59 p.m. and 7:12 p.m. on February 19th.
Why did that draw your interest?
The 2 phones showed to be within the area of the apartment complex that Mr. Vang resided at, and there appeared to be no outgoing activity from the phones.
As far as Mr. Vang's phone, could you tell if there was anything occurring on that phone?
The device showed plugged in on a charger, and also showed that there was a movie playing through Netflix.
Does it show any other manipulation of that phone or movement of that phone?
Not between that time period.
When you reviewed Mr. Vang's phone, was there a lot of activity on that phone typically on a typical day?
I was informed by the agent that reviewed the phone that there's typically a lot of activity going on the defendant's phone.
But between that 5:59 p.m. time frame and 7:12 on February 19th, there was just plugged in and playing a movie on Netflix, correct?
Correct.
Did you also try and determine if Mr. Vang had any vehicles?
Yes.
And did he have any vehicles that were registered to him?
Yes.
Did you also try to determine if Mr. Vang had utilized any vehicles that weren't his?
Yes.
Were you able to locate any vehicles that he utilized that did not belong to him?
Yes.
And do you know what kind of vehicle he utilized?
A 1997 Nissan Altima. That was beige or tan in color.
Do you know what day he utilized that?
February 19th, 2024.
Did that vehicle belong to an individual who lived in Two Rivers?
Yes.
And did law enforcement speak with that individual?
Yes.
Were they able to provide information on how Mr. Vang had possession of that Nissan Altima?
Yes.
What information did they provide?
Witness 1 indicated to the agent interviewing them that on February 18th, they had a conversation with the defendant. The defendant had been doing laundry and had asked to borrow Witness 1's vehicle. on the 19th around 5 p.m. and indicated he needed it to provide or deliver money to another individual unknown.
Did witness one indicate if he provided the keys to Mr. Vang or if someone provided the keys to Mr. Vang?
Yes.
And do you recall when the keys were provided to Mr. Vang?
On February 19th, sometime between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m.
Was law enforcement able to view this Nissan Altima?
Yes.
And did that vehicle have any type of license plate?
Yes.
As part of your investigation, what do you do with that kind of information when you're trying to see where a vehicle goes and you have a license plate?
But we can index that information, and we can also do searches to see if that license plate was ran or indexed by another law enforcement officer, agency, or other type of license plate indexing software.
Can you just explain for the court what you mean by indexing?
Yes.
How does that happen?
So the license plate number would be ran through the e-time system. And then a return would come back and it would indicate the make, model of the vehicle, other descriptors, and also any owners or liens on the vehicle as well.
Was that done in this case?
Yes.
And did any information come about that search?
Indicated that it was registered to witness one.
Did any law enforcement run that plate in a time of interest?
So through a search by a criminal analyst, we were able to determine that on the 19th, that vehicle plate was indexed by a Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office deputy.
Did they give you a time approximately?
Approximately 6:46 p.m.
And are you able, excuse me, were you able to determine where that sheriff's deputy was when that plate was ran?
Yes.
And where was that deputy?
In the location of Forest Avenue, near 24th Street and 22nd.
And what municipality?
The city of Two Rivers.
As a result of that information, did you try and obtain video?
Yes.
Throughout this investigation, were you attempting to locate any video that might be relevant to the investigation?
Yes.
And when you were given this specific time and location, did officers try and find any video cameras in that area?
Yes.
Were you able to find any video cameras in that area?
Yes.
And did any of them have any information of interest?
Yes.
What area had video cameras that were of interest?
The St. Vincent de Paul store located at Monroe and 22nd.
That's also in Two Rivers, correct?
City of Two Rivers.
Were you able to view that video from St. Vincent de Paul?
Yes.
And what did you observe on that video?
The video shows what was believed to be at the time the Nissan traveling north on Monroe at approximately 6:47 p.m. Towards 22nd, and then continuing north. And then the St. Vincent de Paul video shows the vehicle returning at approximately between 7:05 and 7:06 p.m.
When the vehicle returned, were you able to observe anything of interest?
Yes, so the vehicle returned from the north, so it was traveling south on Forest Ave, and then went east on 22nd, and then turned into the parking lot at St. Vincent de Paul. The vehicle then pulled up along would be the west side of the building of the store. Could see the Nissan Altima, the license plate, and then observed a male individual later identified as the defendant exit the driver's side door. At that point, the defendant then went to the rear driver's side door, opened that up, obtained a black object that appeared to be a suitcase. The defendant then walked to a side door of St. Vincent de Paul and laid that suitcase down. The defendant then seemed to take a double take at the suitcase and then return back to the Nissan Altima, exiting the parking lot, traveling back north through the intersection.
Were you able to see the clothing the defendant was wearing at that point in time?
Yes.
Was there anything distinctive about the clothing?
So he was wearing a dark colored New York Yankees ball cap with a flat brim and a sticker still on the top of the brim. He was wearing a white winter jacket style, dark clothing underneath, dark pants, and what appeared to be sandals, or referred to as slides, that seemed to be Adidas brand.
Did you observe the defendant on February 20th of 2024?
I did.
And was there anything you noticed about his clothing that day?
The clothing was very similar to what he was wearing on February 19th.
What about the hat?
It appeared to be the same.
And just for the record, the person you know as Mr. Vang, is he present in court?
Yes.
Can you describe where he's seated and what he's wearing?
He's at the defense table wearing the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office inmate clothing, seated next to his defense counsels.
Let the record reflect identification of the defendant.
Objection, Attorney Jensen.
No.
The record will reflect the identification of Mr. Vang.
I'm going to come back to the suitcase in a minute. You indicated you found the video from, or law enforcement found the video from St. Vincent de Paul. Did law enforcement also look in other areas for video that would depict this Nissan Altima?
Yes,
This was a 1997 Nissan Altima, correct?
correct.
Were there any distinctive damage or other items that law enforcement would look for when you're reviewing video?
There was some rust on the sides of the vehicle, and there was also distinctive turn markers that they were using to identify the vehicle.
As part of the video canvassing, were you able to locate or strike that? Was law enforcement able to locate any other video that depicted a Nissan Altima similar to this one, besides the St. Vincent de Paul video?
Yes,
I'm going to start west of Two Rivers. Were there any locations west of Two Rivers that had video?
there was an area on Johnston Drive. Johnston.
Do you recall where that area was approximately?
It was a business approximately half a mile, 3/4 mile north of 310, Highway 310, on the east side of Johnston.
Do you recall approximately what time that the vehicle had passed that business?
Approximately 6:21 p.m.
After 6:21 p.m., was there any video that depicted the Nissan?
Yes.
And where was that?
Another location was located at a power substation that was on Highway 310 on the north side of 310 to the east of Johnston.
Do you know the approximate time for that?
Approximately 6:41 p.m.
And then after that substation, was the vehicle observed?
There was another area observed on Hawthorne Ave, which Highway 310 turns into Hawthorne Ave as it enters into the city of Two Rivers. That was at a private residence. This would have been at approximately 6:44 p.m.
And then there were the observations at St. Vincent de Paul, correct?
Correct.
Was there any other businesses in the city of Two Rivers that you were able to obtain video of this Nissan during that time period between 5:59 PM and 7:12 PM?
There was a Shell gas station that was located to the south of the apartment complex on the east side of Mishcot Road. But Monroe Ave, Forest Ave, and Mishcot are all the same road. The names change throughout the city of Two Rivers.
Do you recall if the Nissans observed going northbound or southbound or both?
At the gas station, is observed both.
I'm going to go back to the suitcase that was dropped off at St. Vincent de Paul, okay?
Okay.
After the video was discovered at St. Vincent de Paul, did officers go back to try and locate that suitcase?
Yes.
And were any black suitcases consistent with the video located?
Yes.
And could you describe that suitcase for me?
It's a medium-sized suitcase with roller wheels on the bottom, black in color. It had a Jeep brand icon on the top part, front top part of the suitcase.
Was that suitcase inspected?
Yes.
And was it transported to the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory?
In Madison, yes.
What type of testing was it submitted for?
DNA testing.
And did the crime laboratory analyst provide you any results?
Yes.
First of all, who is the analyst? Do you recall?
Erica Stocks.
And what type of information did she provide regarding DNA in the suitcase?
From the interior of the suitcase, there was a single source male profile that was developed, and it was consistent with victim child 1.
And that was on the interior of the suitcase?
Yes.
Was she able to do any other testing regarding types of fluid in the suitcase?
She conducted a presumptive test for saliva.
And what was the result of that?
Positive.
You continued on this investigation as part of the investigative team, correct?
Correct.
Were you contacted on September 7th, 2024?
Yes.
And why were you contacted?
I was contacted by the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office about possible skeletal human remains located in a wooded area in Manitowoc County.
Do you recall what roadway these remains were located by?
Yes.
What roadway?
Christy Bob Lane.
And you indicated that was in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin?
Yes,
Did you go out to look at the remains?
I did.
And did you bring anyone with you?
I did.
Who did you bring?
A forensic anthropologist, Dr. Jordan Karsten, who is also a member of the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory.
And was Dr. Karsten able to give you any information on whether these were potential human remains or animal remains?
He identified the remains to be human skeletal remains and could initially observe that they appeared to be subadult.
Now, when you were contacted on September 7th, 2024, was this evening hours or late afternoon?
It was approximately 3:15, between 3:15 and 3:30 p.m. It was a Saturday, September 7th.
As a result of that, was the scene held until the next day to do a proper search?
Yes.
Law enforcement secured the scene?
Yes.
And can you briefly explain how the scene was processed on September 8th?
Yes. So extra personnel from the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory responded along with other law enforcement officers. A plan was put into place in order to recover the remains under the direction of Dr. Karsten in the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory. It's a systematic way that they recover the remains from the area, including removing the skeletal remains from the surface area, and then also conducting a very slow and methodical excavating operation by hand to ensure that they go through and obtain the remains that are in the location.
And that was done in this case?
Yes,
Did you transport the remains somewhere?
yes,
Where did you transport the remains to?
the Manitowoc County Coroner's Office.
Was there a point in time when they were transported to another facility for inspection?
Yes,
Where was that?
the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh, where Dr. Karsten holds his forensic laboratory.
Were you present when Dr. Karstens did his review?
Yes,
You indicated you're on the major crimes unit as well as the cold case unit, correct?
I am part of our Wisconsin Identity Resolution team.
And have you worked with Dr. Karstens before?
I have.
Have you worked these type of cases before where human remains are found?
Yes.
Can you describe what kind of review Dr. Karstens does as part of a crime laboratory team?
Yes. Dr. Carson will re-articulate the remains. Photographs will be taken. He'll conduct measurements. And then in this case, we also had radiographs conducted that he then reviewed. And then after going through the remains, observing, he'll then put together a report with his summary and opinions.
Were you present when he reviewed the remains?
Yes.
And were there any injuries or anything of significance that was brought to your attention?
Yes.
What was that?
One, there was a healed fracture of the zygomatic process of the right temporal bone, which was described to me by Dr. Carson as being a right cheekbone. He explained that it was antemortem or prior to death, and that the healing of it would have showed that the injury would have had to have happened at least several weeks prior. He was also able to identify marks on it that indicated carnivore scavenging of the remains in the area, which was also consistent with when they were recovering the main remains. They weren't in an articulated order in the wooded area as they were scattered about, believed to be from carnivore scavenging.
Were any items sent to the crime laboratory from the remains?
Yes.
And what items were sent to the crime laboratory for identification?
We had a forensic odontologist also conduct an examination who was able to extract 2 teeth, and those 2 teeth were sent to the crime laboratory for DNA testing, along with hair mat that was recovered from the scene.
And was the crime laboratory able to identify who the remains were?
Yes,
And who were the remains?
it was consistent with victim child 1.
Besides Dr. Karsten's review, were the remains also reviewed by a medical examiner?
Yes,
And who is that?
the Fond du Lac County Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Adam Kovac.
Was he able to make any conclusions?
He conducted an overread of Dr. Carson's report and concluded in regards to the death of victim child 1 to be homicide by unspecified means. He did note that pending the results of toxicology, he would reserve the right to change or add an addendum report to his initial report.
When you actually were out at the scene where the remains were located, correct?
Yes,
And can you just, this was a wooded area, correct?
yes.
Was there anything unusual about the tree that these remains were found by? Any unusual substances?
So there were a few trees within the area, but in particular, one of the trees had an unknown or what appeared to be a foreign type of soil or gravel near the base of the tree.
Did any other trees have this gravel or items near the base?
No,
And was that in the area where the remains were located?
yes,
Have you conducted some follow-up regarding this gravel or sand that was observed?
yes.
And what type of follow-up were you able to do regarding this substance?
Law enforcement learned that witness one maintained buckets of sand over the winter at the apartment complex that the defendant resided at, and would utilize the Nissan to get that sand in those buckets. Items were received, and the sand and other samples have been sent to a out-of-state crime lab for analysis.
Were there buckets found in the Nissan when it was searched?
Yes,
This area of Christie Bob Lane, can you describe what kind of road this is?
Chrissy Bob Lane is a gravel road in a very rural wooded area of Manitowoc County. It's approximately 1 mile total before it ends, and it starts at Manitou Drive.
Was law enforcement contacted by anyone regarding the defendant's familiarity with Christie Bob Lane?
Yes,
And was that a resident of that road?
a property owner.
Okay. And did that property owner in Christie Bob Lane indicate what the defendant's familiarity was with that road?
Yes,
And what was that?
that owner had hired the defendant to conduct a pressure wash or power washing job at this individual's residence or property that they own. And this occurred in August, September of 2023.
Did law enforcement attempt to verify the route from the defendant's apartment on Mishcot Road out to Christie Bob Lane and circling back past St. Vincent de Paul and the other areas where the video indicated the Nissan had passed?
Yes,
And was law enforcement able to travel that whole route in less than an hour?
yes,
As part of your investigation, were there also search warrants and subpoenas submitted to Google and other Facebook, other entities to try and gain some information?
yes,
And was there a Google return regarding the defendant's information?
yes.
Was there anything of interest as far as the Google Maps from February 19th of 2024?
Yes.
And what was of interest?
In a return from Google, in a section for my activity between the 18th and the 20th, there were Google recorded information that was zoomed in off of Chrissy Bob Lane, very near where the remains were recovered.
And was that on February 19th or February 18th?
February 18th and also February 19th in the morning hours.
And you indicated it was the area of Christie Bob Lane where the remains were found?
Yes.
I have nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Attorney Jensen?
Did you review the autopsy protocol report?
I did.
And you've reviewed those before, correct?
Yes.
But you have an understanding of the phrases and the words that a medical examiner uses, correct?
Yes.
So when a medical examiner formulates an opinion that the manner of death is homicide, that means only that it was not natural causes, correct?
Means it was at the hands of somebody else.
Right. And means it was at the hands of another human being, correct?
Yes,
But this medical examiner was not able to say the means of causing death, correct?
correct.
So we don't know if it was trauma, do we?
We don't.
We don't know if it was starvation, correct?
That's correct.
We don't know if it was suffocating, right?
Correct.
We don't know how this child died, do we?
Correct.
No further questions.
Attorney Labrie, any follow-up?
Nothing, Judge. Thank you.
All right, may this witness be excused?
Yes.
May step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any other witnesses, Attorney Labrie?
No, Judge.
Attorney Jensen, any witnesses?
No, we rest.
All right, I'll hear from the state with regard to argument.
Your Honor, the state moves for bind over. At preliminary hearing, all inferences go to the state, and the state need only to provide testimony that a felony was committed, or probable cause that a felony was committed, and probable cause that this defendant committed it. I think there's multiple felonies that have been shown today. I think there's sufficient testimony specifically regarding hiding a corpse to show probable cause. The victim, child one, was in the care of the defendant. That child is deceased, and there is no one who had seen that child independently of the defendant since February 16th. We have the driving on February 19th, where he leaves his phone at home, has a movie playing, and is traveling in a borrowed vehicle throughout the Two Rivers area. He's looking on a map for this Christy Bob Lane, which is a remote road that he's familiar with. The remains were found in this wooded area with gravel or sand that was at the base of the tree where the child would have been placed. I think there's sufficient probable cause for that specific charge, but I also think that there is also probable cause for the physical abuse based upon the punishments that were imposed as far as the forced standing, the sleep deprivation, and other punishments that were imposed by this defendant while in his care between January and February of 2024, or at a minimum that there was neglect. I think there's multiple felonies that have been shown, and the state would ask for bind over. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Jensen.
Well, I want to begin by reading a subsection of 970.03 concerning preliminary examinations, specifically subsection 10, which reads, in multiple count complaints, the court shall order dismissed any count for which it finds there is no probable cause. The facts arising out of any count ordered dismissed shall not be the basis for a count in any information. Now, in a case, State versus Johnson, the Court of Appeals recognized that there's some discord between that section and the section concerning informations, the filing of informations. And the way the court resolved it is the court should dismiss any count for which there is no probable cause, but that count may be included in an information if it is transactionally related. So the reason I think that's important is because under no view of this evidence, even giving the benefit of any reasonable inference to the state, is there probable cause to believe that Mr. Vang committed count one, which is causing death by child abuse. The state was unable to present any information as to how the child died, the cause of death. That's why I clarified that the medical examiner calling or characterizing it as a homicide means only that it was not death by natural causes, that it may have been at the hands of another human being. But the medical examiner was not able to say what actually was the cause of death. And in the absence of evidence concerning the cause of death, there's no way there's probable cause to believe that Jesse Vang caused the death of that child by neglect or abuse. So there is no probable cause for count one under the statute. That has to be dismissed. Concerning the hiding of a corpse, again, even giving the benefit of every reasonable inference to the state, their theory is that on February 19th, I believe was what the date was, when they tracked that borrowed car to the St. Vincent de Paul store, and that they found a suitcase, and inside the suitcase was DNA belonging to the child as well as saliva. That, it is not a reasonable inference to believe that the child was in that suitcase and was taken out to that location where where the body was found that day by Jesse Vang. That is a leap of faith. It's not a reasonable inference. There just is no reason to believe that. So I don't think there's probable cause for count two either. And so I think that should be dismissed. But if the court binds Mr. Vang over on count two, hiding of a corpse, which is what the state is recommending, I don't think they even believe there's probable cause for count one. We can argue in front of the trial judge whether this count one of homicide is transactionally related to the hiding of a corpse. But as for today's purposes, I think both counts should be dismissed.
Thank you, Attorney Jensen. As the parties have indicated, the purpose of a preliminary hearing is for the state to show that any felony was probably committed and that this defendant probably committed it. The state meets that burden, a relatively low burden, by providing proof through testimony. In addition, at this stage, the court views the testimony in the light most favorable to the state. In this case, the court believes the state has provided sufficient testimony to meet that burden, and I will find probable cause that Mr. Vang committed a felony in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, and I will bind him over for further proceedings. Do the parties wish to have a separate arraignment, or are you prepared to proceed today?
I'm asking for an arraignment date, Judge.
All right. Is there any day or time that works better for the parties?
My days are all different.
All right. We'll go off the record for scheduling purposes.
Judge, I'm fine if we do the arraignment by Zoom. I don't know if that would assist counsel with their schedules.
Well, it would help, but it still depends on what the date is.
Okay.
How does Tuesday, November 12th look at is that date available, Attorney Jensen?
Well, Mr. Mogan and I have a long motion hearing in Fond du Lac County starting at 9.
All right.
And then I have a plea and sentencing in the afternoon. So the short answer is no.
Okay. How about November 18th at 11?
I can do that.
Judge, are we able to do 11:30? I made a motion hearing starting at 10 and branch 3, and I would hope to be done by then.
Yeah, that's
Would 11:30 work on the 18th, Attorney Jensen?
yes.
All right. Let me just check to make sure that we can do it at that time. All right. we'll go back on the record. The parties have decided on the arraignment date to be November 18th at 11:30. If the parties wish to appear by Zoom, that would be permitted. I believe the jail would require 24 hours notice for an in-person hearing. We're back on the record, right?
I have a question about that. I wouldn't have a problem appearing by Zoom as long as Mr. Vang is not sitting here in court at an empty.
All right. So if you want to appear by Zoom, we'll have Mr. Vang by Zoom also.
That, I would prefer that.
All right. Is there anything else needed, Attorney Jensen?
No, thank you.
Attorney Labrie?
No, Judge, thank you.
All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, see you then.